Hello and welcome to Ensemble Teacher Tech. Hope that's also a welcome back. We, in episode 2, are going to cover online rehearsals and backing tracks, but specifically what I'm not going to talk about is playing parts one at a time on your own instruments and making multiple track recordings. We're not going to sequence multiple track recordings. What we're going to do is the path of least resistance. We're going to take pre-existing MP3 or WAV files as reference recordings, and we're going to use those to teach class. We're going to create backing tracks right from those. And one of the things that I've talked to about with a lot of directors is what happens when the tempo changes. I struggled with this myself, particularly last year, what to do about, a ritornello in the piece, and we can actually make a backing track that's worthwhile. There's a workflow, it's easy, you have to follow my step-by-step instructions here, but I think it's doable and anyone could do this as long as they've got this guidance. And then finally, I'm going to give you just a little taste of how I set myself up for success by organizing the rehearsal tracks. I am Greg Charest. I've been a band director for the last 20 years in beautiful Rhode Island. And this is beautiful Rhode Island, by the way. And I'm very, very thankful today at a point where I'd just like to give a shout out to Randall Standridge. Earlier this school year, I purchased the Flex Band piece of Festival of Carols. I've been rehearsing it right now with my kids in the middle school band. And Randall has done a lot of great work this year, and one of the things he gives teachers are several options for backing tracks. And you're saying, why, Greg, are you making a video about backing tracks when Randall gives us backing tracks? I'm a band director. I want more control. What band director doesn't want more control? So I'm going to show you how to manipulate these tracks into better rehearsals is really what I want for you. I also would like to mention, if you haven't watched episode 1, and of course we're young in this experience here, but episode 1 deals with playing backing tracks, but one of the things you need to know about me is that I use a Mac, and this is definitely doable on a PC, but one of the things that makes this much more efficient for me is the Pro Apps Bundle for Education from Apple. Of course, I'm not endorsing them in any way other than I'm not a paid endorser, I suppose is what I mean, but this is definitely worth your $200. For that $199.99 price, you get Final Cut Pro, which is professional video editing software. Today we're going to use Logic Pro, sometimes also known as Logic Pro X. We are never going to cover motion and compressor here at Ensemble Teacher Tech, but main stage is something I've got big plans for, probably later in the school year. Okay, so totally worth the money, $199. I know you're saying, really? You want me to spend that money? Yes, I do. I think that it's worth it. Tell your administrators to give me a call. They should be buying this for you. Honestly, this is going to make you a more effective teacher, especially this year, especially when you have to produce some sort of electronic concert, right? Okay, so we are going to open Logic, and Logic is essentially GarageBand. It's based on GarageBand, and what Logic excels at is, Logic is a DAW, it's a digital audio workstation, and so what it really excels at is complex tasks that are probably too complex for GarageBand. We're going to drag our MP3 file into this. So what I've got here is an audio track. I want it to say inputs 1 and 2. That's a stereo file for input and output, by the way, I should have said. One track is enough right now, and you can click Create. And so this gives me this one track here. I'm going to open up my downloads folder. I had downloaded this file earlier today, and I'm just going to take this and literally drag it right into this space right here. Excellent. All right, so a little slow there, but we're done here. Okay, great. So this seems so easy, right? We just click play and it plays back, right? And it plays back. There we go. So one of the things I love about what Randall has done here is he's included clicks at the beginning here. I love the idea of the metronome. I'm going to make my view here just a little bit easier for you to see. Excellent. Okay, and maybe we'll make the vanity camera go away. So what Randall's done here, and many other composers are doing similar things, is he's given us a click track. This is an advantage for us as we begin to set things up here. Okay, so you can see the waveforms of the actual click track. Before we do any of the actual editing here, there's some setup that we need to do. So what I want you to do is observe the top of the screen here. So we have the, there's an arrow on the right-hand side of this window. This is the control bar, of course. I'm going to click this display mode window, and I want you to choose custom. Okay, that's going to give us a lot more information to use here. Another thing that is worthy of your attention is, and of course you don't have the conductor score in front of you, but I do, and this piece is in 4/4 time. Also, the tempo here is 132 beats per minute. So I'm going to click on that. And don't be alarmed by the MP3 behind me adjusting. There's nothing happening to that. It's just moving the view. But I have 132 beats per minute. That's very, very important to fix. You do need to know your starting tempo, or the tempo that the recording is at, not necessarily the recording, and not necessarily what the intended performance tempo of the piece is. It's got to be the tempo of your recording, at least the starting tempo of your recording. Okay, so let's see here. We've got this tempo set up. We chose the time signature, and we've got our MP3 here. So the next thing I'm going to do is, I don't know if you have ever done any kind of audio editing before, but at the top of the screen is a ruler. And this ruler is the time ruler. It gives us where the beats are. So you can see here's measure 1. This is measure 1, beat 3. Here's measure 2, beat 3. And so what I want to do is I want to trim the tail of this file. I'm going to try and line up the clicks that Randall's given us. And again, this is a major advantage to using a track that was intended to be used this way. If I didn't have a track that had clicks already in it, what I would be doing is lining up the downbeat of the performance itself with the beginning of measure 3. I'll show you that in a minute, but I'm just going to blow this up. I'm using pinch to zoom here on my mouse trackpad. That click right there is supposed to be the beginning of the second measure. And if I've done this correctly, it will line up, and I could even use the metronome if I wanted to. And you can see my metronome actually clicks along with Randall's clicks, so that's great. I'm going to then take the track and just bring this all the way to the edge and double check. Okay, so there's his clicks. Here's my metronome. That's good. I'm happy with lining up. Okay, that's great because we had those clicks to line up. That's going to help us with finding control later on. But I don't want Randall's clicks only because I want my sounding metronome to be what's consistent for the student, so they're not hearing more than one kind of metronome. And again, like I said, I would line up the start of the first chord with, or what, first melody, whatever, with the beginning of measure 3. And the reason for that is I want 2 measures of time, 2 measures of click for the students to prep. Okay, so the next thing that I want to bring to your attention is that when we're looking at this, I'm actually going to simplify my view here and get rid of the mixer that was up here, okay? So what I want to do is make sure that I have the arrangement outlined here for myself. And so there is this box up here on the top left-hand side of the screen. Of course, there's a plus sign for adding new tracks. There's a new track with duplicate settings. And then the next thing over is the global tracks. And we're going to use the global tracks, but specifically a marker track. These are the secret to starting in the right place in rehearsal. So if you're running a linear rehearsal from beginning to end of the piece every single time, then fast forward through this. But if you're starting at intermittent places throughout the piece of music, then this is going to be helpful for you. Wherever your cursor is placed is where a marker is going to be placed. So you click a plus sign here next to marker. And I always just like to rename these like M1 for measure 1. And of course, the next measure number, the next box in Randall's piece is at the beginning of measure 3. And that's going to end up being here, okay? So we're doing a little bit of math. Obviously, 3 minus the 2 measures in front is going to be 1. So 5 minus the 2 is going to be measure 3. I'm going to put my marker there. Now, I'm not going to make you sit and watch me add all of these markers, but I do advise you to take your own time and to add the marker tracks throughout the entire piece. I'm undoing that work for a reason. I'm going to move my cursor here, and I have already made markers for the entire piece of music. So you can see all my measure numbers. And you, by the way, you might be tempted to, you might see this word arrangement here. An arrangement track is not maybe what you think it is. It seems like I'm outlining the arrangement that Randall made, right? But that's a funny word in Logic. Let's just not go there. But you need markers and not the arrangement track, I promise, okay? Okay. So what I've done here is not only outlined where all the important measure numbers and cadences are, etc., but I've also found places like measure 51 where there is a tempo change. That's a big deal, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Joyful measure 53 is another important place in the score. So I've marked those as places that I can use as waypoints throughout the editing process. So I've got M51 here. It's not a marimba, it's a measure number, and joyful at M53, of course, okay? So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to add the click itself, and this is pretty easy to do. We're going to use a software instrument. So if you go up here to the top left to add a new track, we're going to choose a software instrument. Now, I do this all the time, so the instrument Klopfgeist comes up on its own, but normally it would say empty channel strip, or at least I think that's what it would say. It might say another thing if you had used a software instrument differently in a previous Logic session. But what we're going to do is go down to Utility, and you're going to find Klopfgeist. Okay, and so once we click Create, a window should appear. Yes, and it does. Excellent. So we're going to do some settings here. Logic has this great tool called the Klopfgeist, and it's the click track, basically. It's usable, but I think it needs a little bit of zhuzhing, as we would say in the business. We're going to change the tonality settings from the default 50 to 0.8, right there, or 0.5 to 0.8. And just to make it louder and easier for the students to hear, I'm going to knock this up to 8.5 decibels, okay? This is going to go away now. Of course, I'm on a Mac. Command W makes that go away. If you needed to find it again, you can go to the top of your screen and open the mixer view. And on that track, you can see right here next to input is Klopfgeist. Click on the Klopfgeist, and that menu comes back. So if you want to experiment with those settings, by all means do. Okay, so this is a MIDI instrument, and what that means is that this can write MIDI sounds. Just going to make this a little bit easier to view. And what we need to do is use the piano roll here. So I'm going to open my edit window. On the top left hand side of the screen, that's the scissors button. Of course, there are hotkeys for that as well. And that's going to open up the piano roll. What I'm about to do is to show you something that's somewhat arbitrary, but the arbitrary thing is the notes that I'm about to choose. You could choose any pitch you want, okay? In the piano roll, we're going to change our cursor to a pencil. This allows us to write pitches here. And I like tritones, so I'm going to add a note on beat 1 here. And in fact, I'm also going to adjust it so that it's a full beat long. You can see measure 1, beat 2 is in my timeline here, okay? And I'm next going to put a click on beat 2, and I'm going to use C4 for that. Okay. This is in 4/4, so we need clicks on beat 2 and beat 3 and beat 4. And this is, honestly, this is kind of it. So we've got 4 beats of click. If I was to solo this track and have you listen to it, it's the click track at 132 beats per minute. All right, and the next step here, I'm going to close my edit window. This is a pretty simple function, and if you've used GarageBand before, you might be familiar with this. But if you hover your mouse on the top right-hand side of this MIDI element, you can use the looping tool. And what we're going to do is we're going to loop this all the way to the end of the track. Now, this particular track does not use any time signature changes, and I can show you that in a subsequent video. I'm really focusing today on tempo. But this gives me the click track throughout the entire piece of music, and of course I have that soloed, but we can listen to this from the beginning. 2 measures of click, and then the piece. Okay, isn't that great? Isn't that grand? I'm going to turn the volume down here just a bit so that we can talk over it in the future. That lines up perfectly for a period of time. But when we get to the tempo change, it's not going to work. And I can show you that really quickly here. So let's see, we're going to scroll down to, it should be still lined up here around measure 50. And this is straightforward because I'm pretty sure that Randall did this on a computer. So the tempo is pretty consistent. But the point here is that any place that the tempo changes, you're going to have some variation to work with or work around. I'm going to show you the workflow for that in a second, but just as an example, so here's the click track, the Klopfgeist track that I just created. I'm going to turn my metronome off just for sonic clarity. So the track is so consistent that the metronome still lines up. Now, you're saying, okay, yeah, that's annoying, and there's the tempo change. What if you also had a track where the tempo was not consistent? Well, we can fix this in the same exact way that I'm about to fix this tempo change right here. Okay, but before we go any further, it's worth mentioning that the next step here is critical, that you follow the workflow. Follow my instructions directly. Leaving a step out can have destructive consequences, okay? All right, so we've tested the click track. It works. You know that you can do this. We are going to change a setting at the top of the screen in our control bar. And this says Project Tempo menu, Keep Tempo. That's the default setting. We now want this to read Adapt Tempo, Adapt Project Tempo. That's critical. It has to be done now. You can't do the next things and then add the adapt tempo. It's too late to do it at that point. It must be done now. Okay, so we are about to engage in some things that are also called destructive actions in the audio world. A bunch of this stuff can't be undone, so this is a good time to save your track if you're afraid that you might need to go back. Okay, I'm going to plot on here just for the sake of the lesson. Okay, so we've changed Keep Tempo to Adapt Tempo, and that allows the time ruler, excuse me, here at the top, to adapt the changes of tempo. And it's also going to force my click track that I just created on the Klopfgeist. It's going to force that to comply with my tempo changes. So next, I want you to select the track with the MP3 recording. Clicking on that track is going to highlight it. You can see the change of color. And we need to use a tool that's called the Smart Tempo tool. That is included in the Edit menu. So when you click on the Edit menu, after having selected that MP3 file, it's probably the default thing to show up. That's called the Smart Tempo. You can see it right here on the right-hand side, highlighted in blue. It's going to prompt you to analyze this. And again, this can only be done after you've changed this screen to say Adapt Tempo. So you're going to click it, and it's going to analyze it. This is real time. I'm talking through this. There's no fancy editing going on here. And actually, not a lot happened, except to say that we have been given new lines here in the bottom of the track. All of these orange lines are where Logic thinks the beat is in the recording. And that's not to say that it went through it with a fine-tooth comb and found the downbeat of every measure. That's not what it is. It's where the metronome click is. But we can move these places where the metronome click is. So this is pretty straightforward at the beginning. You remember that the tempo was already correct, but now I just need to work from where the tempo change is. So I'm going to show you that it starts around here. So let's move to measure 51. Okay, which is actually measure 49 in real life, okay, according to my markers there. But I'm going to just place the cursor there for a minute, and we're going to talk about these handles here, okay? So there's some dangerous stuff that can happen if you're not careful, so be very deliberate when you're doing this. I say dangerous, but obviously everything I've done so far, except for talk to you, has been able to be done in just a couple minutes. So there's a lesson here, and that's taking longer, but this is not a super slow process. You can do this relatively quickly. Okay, there are a number of options here. The first being set downbeat. If you were working with these handles and knew without a doubt that beat 1 of a measure was at that spot, you could click set down beat, and it will consider this line now to be beat 1. The lighter colored lines are where beat 1 is in all of these measures. You can see they line up with the numbers, the measure numbers here, okay? But we don't need that right now. We don't need set down beat. We also have move marker, and that's going to allow us to move it back and forth. I'm not clicking on this to show you this because it's a destructive action and I can't undo it. We can do a scale selection, and what that means is it's going to move everything in the highlighted window. See, this only has this one marker, but this has several markers, so they're going to move in relationship to each other. The most important one for today is scale left and move right, which you can see everything to the right of beat 1 of the measure becomes highlighted, and that's going to move things over. We're going to use this quite a bit today. And of course, move all does exactly what you would think it would do, and it literally moves everything in the entire recording, and that is super dangerous, so be careful of that guy. Okay, so I know that my tempo change happens somewhere around here, so I'm just going to use my ears and listen. Okay, good old-fashioned listening. What we're listening for is where beat 1 is in the measure after the tempo change begins. So I'm trying to find the beginning of the next measure after the tempo change, and I'm also visually identifying. I know it's going to be around here. It's going to be somewhere in the waveform. I need to find out where beat 1 actually is in that measure. So let's listen. 3, 4, 1. So beat 1. I know this piece already. I've already done this process, so I happen to know that beat 1 is over here. So what I want to do is I want to scale left and move right, and you can see I moved my cursor to approximately where beat 1 is. Okay, it's right in there. We can move this around again if we need to, but I'm going to choose scale left and move right, and I'm going to line this up with where I know beat 1 to be in the waveform. Okay, you can see everything on the right moved there. And now let's go back to measure 51 and let's listen. It's not perfect, okay? And I'm going to show you how to make it more perfect, but it's much more perfect, or at least a lot closer to perfect. 1. And there's the downbeat. You can hear it clear as day, right? So there's a few things we need to fix here. One, by the way, I want to continue to come back to the same place. I want to continue coming back to measure 51 here. So there's something called cycle mode. I can click right near measure 51 and drag my mouse over a few measures here, and it creates this orange bar. Whenever I press play, which I'm using the shortcut command, by the way, which is a space bar, it's always going to start at the beginning of that. Okay, so I'll be able to come back to that. 1, 2, 3. So what I'm really going to listen for is where each beat is, and sometimes you can see little clues in the waveform. So I'm pretty sure that beat 2 is a little bit closer there. I'm only now going to move single markers to where I think they belong. I'm not totally sure about this one, and I'm pretty sure this guy belongs here at the beginning of that waveform. This one I know we're going to have to move. Let's listen. Okay, so I think this beat belongs just about here. I'm going to move a single marker right there. Let's listen to that. Okay, so this measure 52, right where the retardando is, works. You can even see up here in the global tracks, the tempo track has adjusted. Look at that. We did that. Isn't that awesome? Okay, so my next step here is, and I don't need to continue to come back to measure 51. I can start this now maybe like on measure 52 each time. What I need to know is, in the following measure now, where is beat 1? Okay, so I'm going to listen again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And so in the waveform, I've identified this as the start of the next measure, and this lighter orange bar is where beat 1 ought to be. Excuse the noise in the background. I'm late hours at school here, and the janitors are roaming around. I'm going to scale left and move right, and again, I'm going to stretch this right there. And let's listen to it again from the beginning of this cycle. So that's approximately correct. I'll just clean this up a little bit by moving individual markers. That guy belongs there. He belongs here. I think this is a little closer. Okay, and the tempo is faster again here. So again, the process is find where the downbeat is in the waveform. Let's make this easier so that you don't have to listen to this again. 3, 4, 1. So I identify this waveform approximately here as beat 1. Now, we learned about set downbeat. I told you what that did. That's going to change the entire track. That changes everything, and it's going to ruin all the work you just did. So it's easier to just find where beat 1, where you want beat 1 to be, this lighter orange line. And again, scale left and move right. I'm going to move it to my cursor. Actually, I think it's a little bit to the left of the cursor, but let's just listen. Notice, by the way, that everything on the right-hand side of the measure that I just moved stays at a different tempo, stays at the tempo that we originally started at. Okay, so I feel like this is in the right spot. These clicks are clearly not, so we're going to move them one at a time. This guy, I'm pretty sure, belongs here. I think you belong there. This guy, did I just gender a marker in Logic? That's the weirdest thing I've done all day for sure. Pretty sure this one belongs here. And let's listen. Welcome to my life, guys. Now, the magical thing about this track is that it goes right back to 132 beats a minute. If that was not the case, you would have to adjust. And that's eminently doable by moving these markers, okay? But what I'm here to tell you is that with a little bit of practice, moving these markers becomes pretty easy. We'll listen to this one more time. Let's do the whole sequence. I chose this piece and asked Randall for permission to do this because it's very, very straightforward, and it's easy to show you how to do just a small amount of this in a small period of time. But the process is very similar for doing multiple tempo changes all throughout the piece, okay? So check this out. So there it is. That is the tempo change in this piece of music, and I have a click track that works throughout. Now, I did tell you, I sort of teased you a little bit and told you that I was optimizing this track for use in class. By the way, using cycle mode is super helpful in class. I'm going to turn that off for right now, though, and just tell you that if I'm teaching rehearsal and I want to start at measure 42, I can use Logic to do that. I can just open Logic and run it through my audio engine while I'm teaching class. The ruler at the top of the screen here, let's turn this off also so we're just looking at one thing. The ruler at the top of the screen here gives me individual markings for where measures begin. And so if I want to have the students play measure 42, I move my cursor 2 measures prior to that, and they can hear 8 beats of click or 2 measures of click. And 1, 2, ready, and play. And there it is. They know where to come in, and my students are at this point trained to be able to perform to that. Okay, I'm going to give you one more awesome tool here today. This is the bonus. I actually meant to mention this earlier, and I'm sorry I didn't, but you're saying to yourself, great, I've got a click track. This track's too fast. My kids can't play this. This is my 6th grade band, my 5th grade band, my 7th grade band. Right now I'm using this with my COVID 7th and 8th grade band, which is a much different ensemble than I've ever taught before. Some of them I've never even met in person. But if this track is too fast for you, this 132 beats a minute, now remember we chose adapt tempo. This is going to be super useful for you. Oh my God, you're going to love me for this. You're going to go into the menu here. We're going to customize this job, right? And we're going to go into Customize Control Bar and Display. Okay, so that was in the control bar. We found the down arrow. Earlier we just clicked Custom View, but now we're going to click Customize Control Bar and Display. And when we do that, we're going to use a tool in Logic that's called Varispeed. Varispeed is your new best friend. So let's just pretend this is, so it says speed only plus minus 0%. You can see this right here. That's going to be the original tempo of approximately 132 beats per minute. So this is actually the tempo that is being followed here. So what's that? It's too fast for your students. By clicking and dragging, I can reduce this tempo. I'm going to do something really dramatic so you can see that it's a big difference. How about a nice round 25% difference? And I'll tell my students we're starting at 42 with 8 clicks intro. Here it is. Instruments up. 3, 4, 1, and breathe. Here it is, and da. That is much, much slower, and you can make it even more slow. It slows the MP3 down. Your life is so much better now. Imagine that. Now, I will tell you that if you try to export this, Varispeed does not change the tempo of the output track. So you're still going to get the 132 beats a minute. You will get the tempo changes that we just programmed with the Klopfgeist sound, but you will not get a speed change. There are other ways to do that, and I can show you that another time. But for now, I think it's just worth mentioning to you that one more time. I'm so thankful to Randall Standridge for his permission to use that track today, and I hope that you go to his website. Again, I'm a big supporter of independent composers, and I try to buy that music whenever I can from them, working in consortiums, commissioning music as often as possible. Randall's been great, and I'm very thankful to him. And of course, I hope you'll join me again. I will be making some more of these videos, and I think my next one is going to be based on lining up videos in the grid for your virtual ensemble. I think that's an incredibly useful tool for you, and it's very easy, particularly if you just purchased that Apple Pro Apps bundle for education. All right. Here I am, Greg Charest in beautiful Rhode Island, and I just want to say thanks again for coming. I'll see you guys next time. Take care.